My daughter came home with her hair cut in perfect straight lines. When I confronted her teacher, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "He said you'd come eventually." When I demanded to know why she'd targeted only the Asian girls, she picked up the scissors and whispered, "Because their beauty makes them visible, and visible girls get taken." I reported her that morning. That was 4 months ago. Yesterday, my daughter read her victim impact statement in court. Ms. Williams didn't blink, but her hands shook the whole time. My daughter came home one day with her hair shorter than when she'd left that morning. "Did you cut your hair at school?" I asked, touching the blunt ends. She looked down at her hands. "Ms. Williams says I must be pulling it out from stress." That didn't sound like Chloe at all. She's the kind of kid who spent 3 years growing her hair out just to donate it and then immediately start growing it again. But I figured 7th grade was tough. Maybe she was anxious or something. Then 2 weeks later, it happened again. Another inch gone in a perfect straight line. "Chloe, someone cut your hair," I said after dinner. "Tell me what happened." She started crying. "I don't know, Mom. I swear I don't know." She seemed genuinely terrified, and Chloe tells me everything. We'd stayed up until midnight last week talking about her crush on Jackson Miller. Something was really wrong. I started texting other moms from her grade. My phone exploded, but not how I expected. Grace Huang's daughter had the same problem. So did Monica Yoon's. Kelly Tanaka typed what we were all starting to realize. Wait, is it only the Asian girls? That Thursday, I left work early and waited in the parking lot. At 2:15 p.m., I watched Ms. Williams lead 6 girls, including Chloe, into the old music room. All of them were Asian. My heart was pounding. 25 minutes later, they emerged. Chloe's hair was 2 inches shorter. "What were you guys doing in there?" I asked in the car. "Getting measured for graduation," she whispered. But that made no sense. Graduation was 7 months away. The next morning, I walked straight into Ms. Williams' classroom before school started. She was arranging scissors on her desk. "We need to talk about my daughter's hair," I said. She looked up and studied my face for a long moment. "He said you'd come eventually." "Excuse me? Sit down, please." Her voice was strangely calm. "I've been waiting to have this conversation. Someone's been cutting my daughter's hair." "I know. I've been cutting it." She folded her hands on the desk. "Your daughters, Lily Zhao's, Emma Watanabe's, all the Asian girls who look like her." I stared at her, my mind trying to process what she'd just admitted. She wasn't denying it. She was confessing. "Why?" My voice came out as a whisper. "Because they need to learn." She picked up one of the scissors, turning it over in her hands. "Their hair is too beautiful, too perfect. It makes them targets." I gripped the edge of her desk. "Targets for what?" "For men like him." Her eyes went distant. "My daughter had hair just like Chloe's. Long, silky, black. Everyone always commented on it." And then one day, she set the scissors down with a sharp click. One day she came home without it. My stomach twisted. "Someone hurt your daughter?" Someone noticed her. Ms. Williams stood and walked to the window. "She was 13, same age as your Chloe, walking home from school when a man started following her. He kept calling out about her beautiful hair. She ran, but he grabbed her ponytail. Her hand went to her own short gray hair. She had to cut it off with her house key to get away." I felt sick, but something didn't add up. "So you're cutting their hair without permission? Without telling anyone?" "I'm protecting them." She turned back to me, her face hard. "Do you know how many girls get targeted because they stand out? Because they're too pretty? Too noticeable? I'm making them invisible. Safe. That's not your decision to make." I stood up, anger flooding through me. "These are our daughters. Your daughters who you send out into the world like lambs to slaughter." She moved back to her desk. "Long hair they can grab, distinctive features that make them memorable to predators. I'm doing what you won't." I pulled out my phone. "I'm calling the principal." "Go ahead." She sat down calmly. "Tell them a concerned teacher is giving free haircuts. See how seriously they take that." My hands shook as I scrolled to find the school's number. "You admitted to assault, to targeting Asian girls specifically." "I admitted to cutting hair that grows back." She leaned back in her chair. "And I focus on the girls who need it most, the ones who look like my daughter did, the ones men notice." "You're insane." I backed toward the door. "Stay away from my daughter." "Your daughter who walks home alone on Tuesdays? Who stays after school for drama club until dark?" Ms. Williams' voice followed me. "I know their schedules. I know when they're vulnerable. I'm the only one actually watching." I fled her classroom and went straight to the principal's office. Mrs. Chen wasn't in yet, so I waited, pacing the small reception area. When she finally arrived at 7:45, I followed her into her office and told her everything. Mrs. Chen's expression grew more concerned as I spoke. When I finished, she was already reaching for her phone. "This is completely unacceptable. I'll have her removed from the classroom immediately." She said she's been doing it to protect them, that her own daughter. I trailed off, still processing the conversation. "I don't care what her reasons are." Mrs. Chen's voice was firm. "No teacher has the right to touch a student without permission, especially not to alter their appearance. This is assault." She called someone, speaking in low, urgent tones. When she hung up, she looked at me. "I've asked security to escort Ms. Williams to my office. Can you contact the other affected families? We'll need statements from everyone." I spent the next hour in the parking lot, calling every Asian mother I knew with daughters in 7th grade. The stories poured out. Haircut during special sessions. Girls told they were being measured for various events. Some said Ms. Williams told them their parents had given permission. Others were told they'd won a makeover prize. Grace Huang was furious. Lily came home crying 3 times. She loved her hair. It was down to her waist. Monica Yoon's voice shook. "Emma hasn't worn her hair down since October. She's been hiding under hoodies." By the time I returned to the principal's office, 5 other mothers had arrived. Mrs. Chen had set up a conference room for us. Ms. Williams sat at the far end of the table, still unnervingly calm. "I've asked Ms. Williams to explain her actions to all of you," Mrs. Chen said, "though I want to be clear that regardless of her explanation, this behavior is unacceptable and will be dealt with accordingly." Ms. Williams looked at each of us in turn. "How many of you have taught your daughters to hold their keys between their fingers when walking alone? How many have bought them pepper spray?" "That's not the point," Grace snapped. "Isn't it?" Ms. Williams leaned forward. "You teach them to be afraid, but you still send them out looking like targets. Long hair is a liability. It's something attackers can grab, control them with. So you decided to fix that yourself?" Monica's voice was ice. "Without asking? Because I knew you'd say no, just like my daughter's mother said no." Ms. Williams' composure cracked slightly. "My daughter was me, 25 years ago, and her beautiful hair made her a target. I couldn't save her, but I could save yours." Kelly Tanaka slammed her hand on the table. "By traumatizing them? My daughter won't even go to school some days. Better traumatized than—" Ms. Williams stopped herself. "Then what?" I demanded. demanded, "What aren't you telling us?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "There's been a man watching the school. Silver sedan. He parks across the street during dismissal, always watching the girls with the longest hair." Mrs. Chen straightened. "Why didn't you report this?" "I did, 3 times." Ms. Williams pulled out a folder from her bag. "Security said they couldn't do anything unless he came onto school property, so I took matters into my own hands." She spread photos across the table. Blurry shots of a car, a man's silhouette, license plate partially visible. "This is from last month." She pointed to one photo. "Notice who he's watching?" My blood ran cold. It was Chloe, walking with her hair in a long ponytail, backpack bouncing as she headed to drama club. And this one, another photo, Lily Zhao at the crosswalk, her then long hair catching the sunlight. "Every girl he fixated on, I cut their hair within the week," Ms. Williams said quietly. "And you know what? He stopped watching them, moved on to others, so I cut theirs too." The room was silent. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. Mrs. Chen finally spoke. "Even if this is true, you had no right." "Rights?" Ms. Williams laughed bitterly. "Tell that to my daughter. Tell that to the girl who had to cut off her own hair with a key to escape. Tell that to every girl who's been grabbed, pulled, controlled by her hair." "You should have told us," Grace said quietly. "We could have worked together, gone to the police together. I tried that route 25 years ago." Ms. Williams gathered the photos. "They said without physical contact, there was nothing they could do." "Well, I wasn't waiting for physical contact. Not again. I thought about Chloe's terror, her confusion. You scared them, made them think something was wrong with them. Fear keeps them alert. Confusion keeps them from being predictable." She stood. "I know you'll have me fired, probably arrested, but every girl whose hair I cut is safer because of it. That's all that matters." Mrs. Chen nodded to security, who had been waiting by the door. As they escorted Ms. Williams out, she turned back to us. "Check your daughter's routes home, vary their schedules, and maybe," she paused, "maybe think about shorter hair." After she was gone, we sat in stunned silence. Mrs. Chen assured us that Ms. Williams would be suspended immediately pending investigation, that counselors would be made available for our daughters, that security would investigate the man in the silver sedan. What makes Ms. Williams think she has the right to decide for these families? I'm curious about this silver sedan story. 3 reports to security and nothing happened. But as I drove home, I couldn't stop thinking about those photos. About Chloe walking alone, unaware she was being watched. About Ms. Williams' daughter, 25 years ago, using a house key to hack off her own hair in desperation. That night, I sat with Chloe as she did homework. Her hair, choppy from Ms. Williams' scissors, fell around her face. She'd been trying to hide it with creative styling, but the damage was obvious. "Mom," she said suddenly, "why did Ms. Williams cut our hair?" "Really?" I'd been dreading this question. "She thought she was protecting you, but she was wrong to do it without permission." "Protecting us from what?" I chose my words carefully. "Sometimes people think they know what's best for others, but that doesn't give them the right to make choices for us." Chloe nodded slowly. "Emma said Ms. Williams told her that short hair makes you stronger, that long hair is weakness." "That's not true, sweetheart. Your hair doesn't determine your strength." "I know." She touched the uneven ends. "But maybe I'll keep it short for a while, just until it grows out even." I hugged her, breathing in the scent of her shampoo. "Whatever you want, it's your choice." But even as I said it, I found myself watching the street outside our window, looking for silver sedans, wondering if Ms. Williams had been wrong in her methods, but right in her fears. The next few days were a blur of meetings, statements, and damage control. The school brought in a hairstylist to fix the girls' uneven cuts. Counselors met with each affected student. Parents organized carpools to ensure no girl walked alone. And then Grace Wong called me. "Did you see the news?" I hadn't. I pulled it up on my phone as she talked. "Silver sedan. Man arrested 2 districts over for following middle school girls. They found," she paused, "they found photos. Hundreds of them. All girls with long, dark hair." My hand tightened on the phone. He had surveillance equipment, notebooks with schedules. He'd been watching multiple schools for months. I sank onto my couch. "Our school?" "Yes. They found photos of Chloe, of Lily, of all the girls Ms. Williams cut." After I hung up, I sat in the quiet of my living room, processing. Ms. Williams had been right. There had been danger. Real, immediate danger. But did that justify what she'd done? I thought about her daughter, 25 years ago. About the system that had failed to protect her. About a mother's desperate attempt to save other girls from the same fate. The next morning, I drove to the district jail where Ms. Williams was being held pending charges. I wasn't sure what I wanted to say, but I needed to see her. She looked smaller in the orange jumpsuit, older. When she saw me through the glass, her expression didn't change. "They caught him," I said into the phone. She nodded. "I heard. You were right about the danger, but wrong about everything else." Her voice was flat. "That's what everyone keeps telling me." We sat in silence for a moment. "My daughter wants to keep her hair short," I finally said. "Her choice this time." Something shifted in Ms. Williams's expression. "Good. Choice is what I took from them. I see that now. Why didn't you just tell us the truth about the man watching them?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was a paranoid teacher making excuses?" I wanted to say we would have believed her, but honestly, I wasn't sure. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she continued. "I just wanted them safe, even if they hated me for it. They were terrified, confused, but alive, unharmed." She leaned back. "That's all I cared about." I left the jail with more questions than answers. The other mothers were divided. Some wanted Ms. Williams prosecuted to the full extent. Others, especially after learning about the arrested man, felt conflicted. Kelly Tanaka organized a meeting at her house. "We need to decide what we're telling the prosecutor," she said. "They want victim impact statements." "She assaulted our daughters," Monica said firmly. "The reason doesn't change that. But she might have saved them," Grace countered. "Those photos the police found, he'd marked which girls he was planning to approach. All the ones whose hair she cut," I added quietly. The room fell silent. "So what do we do?" Kelly asked. "Do we push for prosecution? Ask for leniency?" "We tell the truth," I said finally. "All of it. What she did, why she did it, how it affected our daughters. And we let the system decide." But even as I said it, I thought about Ms. Williams's words. The system that had failed her daughter 25 years ago. The security guards who couldn't act until a man entered school property. The police who needed physical contact before investigating. That night, Chloe came to me with scissors. "Will you even it out?" The hairstylist made it better, but it's still not right. I took the scissors carefully. As I trimmed the uneven ends, I asked, "How do you feel about all this?" "Really?" She was quiet for a while. "I'm angry she lied to us, that she scared us, but," she paused. "But when I saw that man's photo on on the news, the one they arrested? I recognized him. He used to wave at me sometimes, always when I was alone. My hands stilled. Ms. Williams was wrong, Chloe continued. But maybe she was also kind of right? Is that weird? No, sweetheart, it's not weird. Sometimes things can be both wrong and right at the same time. Like lying to protect someone? Yeah, like that. I finished trimming her hair. It fell just below her ears now, framing her face differently. She looked older somehow, or maybe that was just everything she'd been through. I think I'll grow it out again, she decided, but slowly, and maybe not as long as before. Your choice, I said. Always your choice. The next weeks were complicated. Ms. Williams was formally charged with multiple counts of assault, but the revelation about the stalker had shifted public opinion. Some saw her as a vigilante hero, others as a disturbed woman who'd violated trust and traumatized children. The trial was set for spring. All of us would have to testify. But for now, life slowly returned to normal. The girls went back to school with a substitute teacher. Security was increased. Parents remained vigilant. And every morning, I watched Chloe style her short hair, seeing her reclaim something that had been taken from her. Not just her hair, but her autonomy, her right to choose. Ms. Williams had been wrong to cut their hair without permission, but she'd been right about one thing. The world was dangerous for young girls. The question was how to protect them without taking away their power. It was a balance I was still learning. We all were. The balance we were all learning became harder to maintain when Ms. Williams posted bail 3 days later. I discovered this when Grace Wong texted me a photo from the grocery store parking lot. Ms. Williams' car, parked right next to the elementary school entrance. I drove there immediately. By the time I arrived, she was gone, but the security guard confirmed she'd been sitting in her car for over an hour, just watching. The restraining order prevented her from entering school property, but the parking lot was public space, a technicality she was clearly exploiting. That afternoon, I picked up Chloe early. She climbed into the car with her backpack heavy on her shoulders, and I noticed her checking the mirrors constantly as we drove away. When I asked about her day, she mentioned feeling watched during recess. The substitute teacher had dismissed her concerns. At home, I called Mrs. Chen's office. Her secretary informed me the principal was in meetings all day. I left 3 messages. None were returned. Grace and Monica reported similar experiences. The school seemed to be hoping the problem would resolve itself before the trial. The next morning brought a new development. Emma Watanabe's mother found a note in her daughter's backpack. Block letters on lined paper. Your mother is making a mistake. Hair grows back. Other things don't. The school's response was to suggest Emma might have written it herself for attention. I started documenting everything. Every sighting of Ms. Williams near the school. Every strange incident the girls reported. Every dismissive response from administrators. My kitchen table became a command center covered in printed emails, photos, and timelines. Kelly Tanaka brought over security cameras from her husband's store. We spent an evening installing them at key points around our homes. The footage from the first night showed nothing unusual. The second night captured a figure walking past Lily Zhao's house at 2 a.m., pausing at the driveway before moving on. The girls began traveling in groups everywhere. No one walked alone anymore. Parents coordinated schedules like military operations, but the stress was showing. Chloe started having nightmares. Emma refused to go to school some days. Lily had cut her own hair even shorter, trying to make herself less noticeable. Then came the substitute teacher incident. Ms. Martinez seemed nice enough at first, but after a week, the girls reported strange behavior. She kept asking them about their hair, about whether they missed their long hair, about whether they felt safer now. When Chloe mentioned this, I felt my stomach drop. I confronted Ms. Martinez after school. She claimed she was just trying to help the girls process their trauma, but something felt off. Her questions were too specific, too leading. When I mentioned this to the other parents, Monica remembered seeing Mrs. Martinez talking to Ms. Williams at the grocery store the previous week. We tried to get Ms. Martinez removed, but the school said they couldn't act on suspicions. We needed proof of inappropriate behavior, so we started recording, not the children, but our own conversations with school staff. How did Ms. Williams know exactly which girls to cut? The arrested man had photos of those same exact students. That timing seems too perfect to be just luck. Makes me wonder if she spotted something specific we're not hearing about yet. Every meeting, every phone call, documented and saved. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. The school janitor, Mr. Valdez, approached me in the parking lot one evening. He'd overheard Ms. Martinez on the phone, talking about the girls, giving someone updates on their emotional states. He didn't know who she was talking to, but he thought we should know. Armed with this information, we demanded another meeting with Mrs. Chen. This time, we brought a lawyer Kelly's sister had recommended. The principal's demeanor changed immediately when she saw legal representation. Suddenly, our concerns were taken seriously. Ms. Martinez was placed on administrative leave pending investigation, but Ms. Williams wasn't done. The notes continued, now left in different places, tucked under windshield wipers, slipped through mail slots. Always the same theme. We were overreacting, making things worse for our daughters, turning a simple haircut into trauma. One particularly disturbing note included photos, not of our daughters, but of other Asian girls from different schools. Girls with long, beautiful hair, girls who looked happy and carefree. The implication was clear. While we protected our daughters, others remained vulnerable. Grace wanted to take the notes to the police, but our lawyer advised caution. Without proof they came from Ms. Williams, they could actually help her defense. She could claim someone else was harassing us, that we were paranoid, seeing threats everywhere. The paranoia accusation stung because sometimes I wondered if it was true. Every car that drove slowly past our house made me tense. Every stranger who looked at Chloe too long became suspicious. The other mothers reported similar feelings. We were living in a constant state of vigilance that was exhausting us all. Then Lily Zhao disappeared for 3 hours. She'd left school with her group as usual, but never made it home. Her mother's frantic calls sent us all into panic mode. We searched the neighborhood, called police, checked every place she might go. We found her at the public library, hiding in the furthest corner. She'd seen Ms. Williams's car following the group and had run. Too scared to go home, too scared to call for help, she'd just hidden. The terror in her eyes when we found her was heartbreaking. This incident finally prompted real action. The police increased patrols around the school. The district hired additional security, but Ms. Williams adapted. She started appearing at other places, the mall where the girls shopped, the movie theater they frequented, always maintaining legal distance, always just watching. Our lawyer lawyer filed for an expanded restraining order, but the judge ruled that public spaces were public spaces. As long as Ms. Williams didn't approach or communicate with the children, she wasn't breaking any laws. The system that had failed her daughter 25 years ago was now protecting her right to terrorize ours. The psychological warfare intensified. Ms. Williams began wearing wigs that looked like our daughter's former hairstyles, long, black, and glossy. She'd sit in her car outside permitted boundaries, brushing these wigs while staring at the school. The message was grotesque but clear. She was keeping their hair safe, even if they wouldn't. Some parents cracked under the pressure. 2 families transferred their daughters to private schools. Another moved to a different district entirely. Our group grew smaller but more determined. We couldn't let her win. We couldn't let her drive us away. I started researching Mrs. Williams's past. Her daughter's incident had been real, I discovered. Old newspaper archives confirmed a 13-year-old girl had been attacked 25 years ago, had escaped by cutting her hair. But the girl's name wasn't Williams. It was Chen. Ms. Williams had never had a daughter. This revelation sent me digging deeper. Ms. Williams had been Ms. Chen's teacher at the time of the attack. She'd been the one to find the girl afterward, traumatized and shorn. The incident had clearly affected her profoundly, but she'd twisted it, made it her own story, her own loss. When I shared this with the group, it changed our understanding but not our resolve. Ms. Williams wasn't a grieving mother, but a disturbed woman who'd appropriated someone else's trauma. It made her actions more comprehensible, but no less dangerous. The trial date approached slowly. Our daughters attended therapy sessions to prepare for testifying. The therapist reported that beneath their fear was deep anger. They felt violated, betrayed by someone they'd trusted. The haircuts were just the visible part of the damage. Ms. Williams's harassment evolved. She started sending letters to our employers, suggesting we were unstable, obsessive parents harming our children with our paranoia. Grace nearly lost a promotion because of questions about her emotional stability. Monica's husband faced scrutiny at his job after anonymous complaints about his family situation. We fought back with documentation. Every letter, every sighting, every incident meticulously recorded. Our lawyer built a harassment case alongside the assault charges, but Ms. Williams was careful. Nothing she did quite crossed the legal line into criminal behavior. The breaking point came during a school concert. The girls had been practicing for weeks, finding comfort in music and routine. Parents packed the auditorium, proud and protective in equal measure. Then, just as the concert began, Ms. Williams walked in. She had a ticket. She'd purchased it online like any community member. She sat in the back row, perfectly legal, perfectly within her rights, but her presence poisoned the entire event. The girls saw her immediately. Some stopped singing, others started crying. The concert fell apart within minutes. Mrs. Chen finally showed real anger, not at Ms. Williams, who left calmly when asked, but at the situation. She called an emergency meeting that night. The school board president attended. Parents filled every seat and lined the walls. The discussion was heated. Some parents wanted to sue the school for failing to protect our children. Others wanted to organize private security. A few suggested we take matters into our own hands, though no one specified what that meant. I stood up and shared what I'd learned about Ms. Williams's past, about the real Chen girl whose trauma she'd stolen. The room went silent. Mrs. Chen herself looked shaken. She hadn't known this disturbed woman had been weaving her family's tragedy into a twisted justification. We agreed on a multi-pronged approach. The school would hire off-duty police officers for additional security. Parents would continue documenting everything. Our lawyer would pursue both criminal and civil actions. And we'd reach out to other schools, warning them about Ms. Williams in case she tried to relocate. But even as we planned and prepared, I could see the toll on our daughters. Chloe had stopped mentioning growing her hair out. She'd stopped talking about Jackson Miller or drama club. She moved through her days carefully, quietly, like someone trying not to be noticed. The other girls showed similar changes. Emma had quit the art club she loved. Lily no longer raised her hand in class. They were making themselves smaller, less visible, exactly what Ms. Williams had claimed to want. But this wasn't protection. It was erasure. One evening, while helping Chloe with homework, I noticed her writing an essay about heroes. She'd chosen to write about Ms. Williams. My heart sank until I read further. She was writing about how villains sometimes think they're heroes, how the worst harm can come from people who believe they're helping. It was a sophisticated argument for a 7th grader, born from premature loss of innocence. I wanted to cry for the childhood she was losing, for the simple trust that had been stolen along with her hair, but I just helped her with her conclusion paragraph and told her I was proud of her insight. The trial was now just weeks away. Ms. Williams's lawyer had filed numerous motions, trying to get evidence excluded, witnesses dismissed, charges reduced. Our lawyer fought each one, but the process was exhausting. Every motion meant another hearing, another day of anxiety. Then Ms. Williams made a mistake. She approached Emma Watanabe at a bus stop, just for a moment, just to hand her a flower and whisper something about staying strong. But Emma's older brother was watching from across the street. He captured the entire interaction on video. The restraining order violation was clear and undeniable. Ms. Williams was arrested again, bail revoked this time. The relief in our group was palpable. Our daughters could walk without looking over their shoulders. They could focus on healing instead of hiding, but the damage was deep. Trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired. The girls still traveled in groups. Parents still checked locks twice before bed. We'd learned that safety was fragile, that someone could decide to target our children for reasons we'd never understand. As the trial date arrived, we prepared our daughters to face their former teacher one last time. The therapist worked with them on coping strategies. We practiced their testimonies until they felt confident. We promised them that after this, it would be over. Justice would be served. But justice, I was learning, was complicated. Ms. Williams believed she'd been protecting them. In her twisted logic, she was the hero of this story. The system that would judge her was the same one that had failed to protect that girl 25 years ago, that had required actual assault before taking action. Our daughters would testify about their fear, their confusion, their sense of violation. Ms. Williams would likely testify about her good intentions, her protective instincts, her frustration with parental negligence. A jury would have to decide where protection ended and assault began. Ms. Williams never even had a daughter. She took someone else's trauma and made it her whole identity. That's such a strange thing to do. I wonder if she really believes her own version of events now after telling it for so many years. The night before the trial, all the families gathered at Kelly's house. We shared a meal, letting the girls play together while parents talked quietly. There was no discussion of strategy or evidence, just parents supporting each other through an ordeal none of us had imagined facing. Chloe found me on the back porch where I'd stepped out for air. She stood beside me looking at the stars. Her hair was growing out now, past her ears but still far from its former length. She looked older, more thoughtful than a 13-year-old should. She told me she was ready to testify, ready to tell her truth. But she also said something that surprised me. She didn't hate Ms. Williams anymore. She felt sorry for her, for living in so much fear that she'd spread it to others. It was a wisdom I hadn't expected, a maturity born from trauma. I hugged her close, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, the same brand we'd always used. Her hair might be shorter, but she was still my daughter. Still the girl who'd grown her hair for 3 years just to donate it. Still kind, still generous, still herself despite everything. Tomorrow would bring the trial, testimony, and hopefully justice. But tonight, we just held each other, finding strength in survival, hope in healing. The world might be dangerous for young girls, but they were stronger than anyone realized. Certainly stronger than Mrs. Williams had believed. As we went inside to rejoin the others, I thought about balance again. How to protect without imprisoning. How to warn without terrorizing. How to let our daughters grow while keeping them safe. It was a balance I was still learning, but now I had help. A community of parents who understood, daughters who'd survived, and the knowledge that we'd face whatever came next together. The trial morning arrived with unexpected complications. I discovered Ms. Williams had hired a new attorney, someone known for defending teachers in misconduct cases. Grace texted me that she'd seen Ms. Williams' lawyer interviewing parents outside the courthouse, asking about our daughter's behavior changes since the haircuts. Inside the courthouse, our group sat together in the hallway. The girls wore their school uniforms, hair styled neatly at various lengths of regrowth. Chloe kept touching her ends nervously, while Emma sat perfectly still, hands folded. The prosecutor reviewed their statements one more time, reminding them to speak clearly and tell only what they remembered. When the bailiff called us in, I watched Ms. Williams enter from a side door. She wore a conservative suit and had styled her gray hair differently. She made eye contact with each girl as they filed past to their seats. Lily grabbed her mother's hand tighter. The prosecutor presented our case methodically. Physical evidence first. Photos of the girl's hair before and after. The scissors from Ms. Williams' desk. Documentation of the pattern targeting only Asian students. Then came the testimony. Each mother described finding their daughter's hair mysteriously shortened, the confusion and fear that followed. The girls testified via closed-circuit video from another room, the judge having agreed they shouldn't have to face Ms. Williams directly. Chloe went first, explaining how Ms. Williams had led them to the music room, how she'd felt the scissors but been told to stay still, how she'd been warned not to tell anyone. Her voice stayed steady until she described trying to hide the damage with bobby pins. Emma testified about being told she'd won a makeover prize. Lily explained how Ms. Williams said her parents had approved the haircut. Each story revealed a different deception, a pattern of manipulation that went beyond simple assault. Ms. Williams' attorney tried to paint the girls as confused, suggesting they'd misunderstood innocent grooming assistants, but the prosecutor had prepared them well. They stuck to facts, describing exactly what happened without speculation or emotion. Then came Mrs. Williams' defense. Her attorney presented her teaching record, 23 years without a single complaint. Character witnesses testified about her dedication to student safety. A psychologist explained how trauma could manifest in protective behaviors. Ms. Williams herself took a stand. She spoke calmly about finding the Chen girl 25 years ago, about the blood in her hair where she'd cut it with a key. She described years of watching girls become victims, of reporting concerns that went nowhere. Her voice broke only when describing the photos of the stalker watching our daughters. The prosecutor's cross-examination was brutal. She forced Ms. Williams to admit she'd lied to the girls, that she'd targeted them by race, that she'd continued even after parents complained. Ms. Williams maintained she'd done it all for their safety, but the prosecutor kept returning to one point. She'd had no right to touch them. During a recess, I found Mrs. Chen in the hallway. She looked exhausted, having testified about the school's response to our complaints. She pulled me aside and shared something unexpected. After learning the truth about her connection to the case, she'd spoken with the girl from 25 years ago. The woman, now living across the country, had been horrified to learn her trauma was being used to justify hurting other children. The closing arguments painted two different pictures. The defense showed a dedicated teacher driven by trauma to protect vulnerable students. The prosecution showed a woman who'd violated trust, targeted children by race, and traumatized them in the name of protection. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. We waited in a conference room, the girls doing homework while parents paced. When the verdict came, we filed back into the courtroom. Guilty on all counts of assault, guilty on harassment charges. The judge would sentence in 2 weeks, but Ms. Williams was remanded to custody immediately. As the bailiff led her away, she looked back at our daughters one last time. I couldn't read her expression. Outside the courthouse, we stood in the spring sunshine. No celebration, just relief. The girls seemed lighter somehow, as if the verdict had lifted a weight they'd been carrying. Parents exchanged hugs and phone numbers, promising to stay in touch beyond this shared trauma. 2 weeks later, we returned for sentencing. The judge had received dozens of letters, some calling for leniency given Ms. Williams' intentions, others demanding maximum punishment for targeting children. Our victim impact statements were read into the record, each family describing the lasting effects. The judge sentenced Ms. Williams to 18 months in prison, 3 years probation, and permanent revocation of her teaching license. She would also undergo mandatory psychological treatment. It felt both too much and not enough, but it was over. The school district implemented new policies about physical contact with students and mandatory reporting of suspicious behavior. They hired a new 7th grade teacher, Ms. Patel, who made a point of meeting with each affected family before school started. Summer arrived with its own challenges. The girls attended a support group for young assault victims, working through their experiences with a therapist who specialized in institutional betrayal. Some days were harder than others. Emma had panic attacks when anyone stood behind her. Lily still flinched at the sound of scissors. But there were good days too. Chloe auditioned for the fall play, her confidence slowly returning. The girls formed a tight bond, their shared experience creating a friendship deeper than typical teenage connections. They started a blog about consent and bodily autonomy, sharing their story in hopes of helping others. By August, most of the girls had grown their hair to shoulder length. They wore it different ways, some always in ponytails, others defiantly loose. Chloe had added purple streaks, a choice she made entirely on her own. The new school year began with careful optimism. Ms. R. Patel proved to be everything Ms. Williams wasn't: respectful of boundaries, transparent in her actions, genuinely focused on education rather than control. The girls slowly began to trust again. I still drove Chloe to school most mornings, but she'd started asking to walk with friends again. We'd established new safety protocols, checking in by text, varying routes, staying in groups, not because of specific threats, but because we'd learned that vigilance and independence could coexist. One October evening, while helping Chloe with her history project, she mentioned she was thinking about donating her hair again when it grew long enough, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. It was her choice, made freely, without fear or coercion. The trial had ended, Ms. Williams was serving her sentence, and life had moved forward, but the lessons remained, about trust and its violation, about protection that becomes control, about the difference between keeping children safe and keeping them small. Our daughters had survived something they shouldn't have faced. They'd testified with courage, reclaimed their autonomy, and begun healing. They were different now, more cautious perhaps, but also stronger. They'd learned too young that not all dangers come from strangers, that sometimes the people meant to protect you can cause the most harm. But they'd also learned they had voices that would be heard, parents who would fight for them, and a strength that couldn't be cut away with scissors. Ms. Williams had tried to make them invisible, but instead, they'd become impossible to ignore. The world was still dangerous for young girls. That hadn't changed. But our daughters faced it now with knowledge, support, and the hard-won understanding that their safety didn't require their silence. They could be careful and confident, protected and powerful. It wasn't the childhood we'd wanted for them, but it was the one they'd survived, together. Thanks for tagging along while I poked at all these questions. Seriously, that was a fun one. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments. Catch you in the next one.